Thank you. Again, my name's Lance Elicker, and I think by this point we've all kind of seen each other walking around, right? And I think some of us probably, I know I have been, wondering what everyone does, right? Are you a customer? Are you selling things? You know, whatever. So I have the dubious distinction of talking about the most important part of information governance, which is capture. And if anyone tells you differently, they're lying. And that's actually not true at all, so I'm the one that's lying. But really what I think is important here is when I look at information capture, right? And what I did is when I started this, I decided to do a Google search. And when you do a Google search on information capture, you have 428 million results. And that's a lot of results when it comes to information capture. I'm sure not all of them are really good. But the thing is, you know, we talk about the information life cycle. We talk about going paperless. We talk about all of these kinds of things, right? But the one thing that we all hear a lot is garbage in is garbage out, right? And that's why I look at capture as not the most critical, but it is definitely the part of information governance that people don't spend a lot of time on, right? Because you've got the people that are making decisions typically are looking for things like running reports and analytics, and it's all back-end stuff. But the problem is those back-ends fail a large majority of the time, unfortunately, because there's not a really good capture process put in place. I mean, think about it, right? So we get this new awesome system, and it's going to be unbelievable, and we're talking about it, and the company spent $1 million on it, and it's ridiculous. But me, as an accounts payable clerk, what I'm doing is my workload is 3 times larger than it used to be. Because what I used to do is I used to get mail, open mail up, look for somebody, their bin, or I've got a courier that walks around and drops those off. So my job is open it up, put a cost code stamp on it, and send it to that person. And my job's done. Now what I have to do is I have to take that, I have to scan it, I might have to put a barcode sheet on it or something crazy. I have to scan it to the right person, I have to validate it's going to the right person, I have to name it 50 different ways. And I have to do all of these things, and it's not going to be successful because I don't want to do that because I'm a $15 an hour employee, and all I want to do is check out at the end of the day. I don't care if you can run cool reports on the back end, right? I don't care if these things are going to help my organization because my job is much more difficult. So I'm sure we've all seen this, right? And so what I wanted to do is just kind of point out, you know, where capture becomes involved in the process. Now, obviously, it's easy because it's the start, so I could say if you don't start right, you're not going to finish correctly, and you know all of those kinds of things. But what I want to do today is just kind of go over my philosophy on capture and what I think is really important when you take a look at a capture process within an organization or within your own organization. So the first start to this, and I think it pretty much could start every single presentation that we do around IG, is discovery, right? If we go to someone and we just say, here, I've got a lot of really cool stuff, and I help lots of companies, don't you just want to buy this? Or don't you want to implement something like this if it's internal? So whenever I look at discovery, I think too many times the discovery starts at the end and works its way back to the beginning, right? Let me sell you something. I'm going to sell you something. You're going to buy something from me. And then what's going to happen is I'm going to figure your business out. So I hope what you purchased is actually going to be valuable to your organization. But that's backward, right? And that's a major problem. So first and foremost in capture is, what the heck do we have going on right now? Right? An audit of those processes. So the thing is, every single company, regardless if it's one person or 50 million people, all do enterprise content management, right? They just probably do it more poorly than others. But we all have our best enterprise content management system first and foremost, which is our Outlook inbox, right? We've got 50,000 emails and we can find anything we want. And then what we can do is we can go to our share drive and we can do a search on all of these folders and maybe find what we want to find or whatever. But the key is, you know, what is the current state? What are you doing now, right? So then once you take a look at what you're doing now, with either paper or electronic documentation, what are the sources, right? Our sources have exploded over the last, 10 years? Because before, you know, it was paper. And now what we're dealing with is paper, and we've got things like social media, and we've got CRM systems, and we have, if you're a big company like EDI, and all of these different ways that we're managing content, right? So we're not managing paper, we're not managing documents, we're managing data and information, which is content in our operation. So first, you have to take a look at, at the documents. What documents do you have, and what's really important to you, and what's really important, because the document isn't important, right? The information on the document's important. So that's the first thing that I think is so critical is we talk about workflow, we talk about all of these kinds of things, paperless office or what have you, but the key is the information, and what is the information on that documentation that I actually need to get? And then I want to take a look at what I have now, right? I think this is a huge problem with organizations, is the siloed problem, right? I've got my EMR system, I've got my ERP system, I've got whatever systems everywhere, and so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start stacking systems on top of systems. And there was a lady that I was talking to, Anne, she kind of brought something up to me about 30 minutes ago where she said, what happens when your kids have Lincoln Logs, and they've got Connects, and they've got Legos, right? You can't put them all together. And the same thing happens in businesses. And so what happens is we just stack things on top of things, and then so once we start stacking more things, software companies get to build stuff that fixes the stacking problem, right? So it's this perpetual issue that organizations get into just because the planning wasn't any good. So applications, where are they coming from? What's going on? And then workflow, right? Workflow being the engine to really be able to provide information to people without them having to look at it. Because when you think about communication within an organization, a lot is one central place, and we're going to send it out, right? That's why email is the bane of our existence, right? Because what we're doing is we're sending information out. Now what I think we need to be looking at is how can we take information and put it in a central place that people can access it? So when they need to access it, they can, and they don't have to contact somebody else. And that all starts with a really good capture method. So structure. So as we get into the nitty-gritty and talk kind of in the weeds, I think the first thing that I have mentioned, data normalization, is probably one of the biggest issues within the capture area, where what we're doing is we're capturing information, but we've got no real structure around capture. And we talk about it, we've got lists, and there are things that we suggest, and we try to put barcodes. But man, when I look at any organization, when I go in, things are all over the place. I mean, dates, Jan 1, 2001, 01, all of these different things and different ways to take a look at how you're going to store information. And so, of course, the person who set it up is the genius, and he knows everything, and his taxonomy is perfect, and then all of us have to figure it out. Well, that's just not going to work, and that's the message that I've been hearing across this whole conference, is that we need to get people involved in our organization. We can't just have an IT guy who doesn't have a skin in the game, or somebody else that doesn't have a skin in the game saying, you know what, that makes the most sense. Let's put an RFP, whoever comes back, we're maybe not the cheapest one, but we're going to pick one that we think is best without getting people involved. So, 40 zettabytes by 2020 of unstructured data. And we've heard it over and over again. The bane of our existence is this unstructured data because we don't have control over it. And how can we go about controlling this unstructured data? So that's why data normalization, I think, is such a key when it comes to capture, is because if I'm going to either implement a new process or I'm going to implement a new system, what I have to understand is all the rest of the systems or all the legacy information I have. How are things named? How are things categorized? And I really want to have that continue to go with that same kind of taxonomy, metadata, or naming conventions, whatever you want to call it. That's something that's really important. Along with data normalization is validation. So, when I go talk to organizations and I sit and I tell, bring the accounts payable clerk, bring these people in. I see them and they're just like, he's going to take my job, and I'm not going to need to work here anymore. And the thing is, so I'm not an AI guy. I don't build robots or anything, right? So I'm not going to replace an entire organization with a bunch of robots to replace the people. The people are really important. People are smart most of the time. And so when we talk about validation, there's a beautiful level of automation that can always take place, but there's always going to be an exception, right? So you've got to have some level of validation or process in place for that validation. If you don't have that process in place, what's going to happen is that garbage is going to slip through a little bit further than it really needs to. Taxonomy, right? I think you guys have heard it. I probably don't ever need to say it again. You guys are all really good at this probably with taxonomy. But again, you know, taxonomy structure becomes really, really important. And the only thing that I'll say, and it was said yesterday, is be able to be flexible with your taxonomy, right? Be able to understand that your business changes, things change, so you can't have this stringent set of rules. I've seen too many organizations that have this set of rules, and then they have an outlier, and they're like, that outlier, we can probably just put it over here, right? And there's never, and there's not this ability to constantly change and evolve our content management structure. Outside influences, right? It makes me scared. You know, I saw somebody talk about what keeps you up at night, and outside influences are what keeps me up at night. What is the system that company didn't tell me about that when we go to implement something, it really needs to connect? Or am I really, again, going back to the data normalization in my CRM system or whatever system that I'm using, are we going to name things the same way? Are we going to store things the same way? And then database limitations. So again, going back to the Legos and the Lincoln logs. So you've probably made a really bad purchasing decision if you bought something that's completely proprietary and it can't connect with anything else. So what are you going to do to resolve that? Or more importantly, let's make sure that we're thinking about these things a little bit more as we take a look at capture, because outside influences are things like, you know, we've got copiers, we've got scanners, we've got mobile devices. We've got all of these things within an organization that we don't have control over. Specifically, I don't have control over because I'm selling you something, but more importantly, if it's my organization, I don't have control over these things. I can try to have control over these things, but things are going to pop up, iPads are going to pop up on the network, things like that. So as opposed to just saying, no, you can't do this stuff, I think it's really important to really take into consideration the outside influences and what could potentially be issues. Now we get to technology. Right, so I've tried to stay away from technology as much as possible because Nick wrote a great article on it. I see this entirely too much where, you know, what we're doing is we're saying, hey, you've got a problem with records management. I have this thing called Unpaid, or I have this thing that's really cool and you should buy it because it works for every single organization. Before I know anything about what you've got going on, I should do this. So now if I've done the right stuff, I've done the discovery, I've understood the way that the organization works, I've done all of these things, now we can get to technology. But it's not an afterthought, right? The requirements are really important. What are your requirements for that technology, and what are the things that it's going to have to do? Right, becoming enamored with, you know, gigawatts and gigawatts and cool features, right? No cool feature has ever made a company go from $1 million to $10 million, right? I hear that so much. Oh, this technology is really cool. Well, that's like the difference between getting a paid app and an unpaid app on your device, right? The unpaid apps you probably don't use because you're like, well, this is pretty limiting, but I didn't pay anything for it, so I feel pretty good about it. Whereas if you pay for it, you've got a skin in the game. You probably actually use it. So when we talk about requirements, we talk, and specifically when it comes to technology, is, you know, what is the situation that we're going to be dealing with? Are people going to be out of the office? Are they going to be in the office? What kinds of applications and what kinds of compliance things am I going to need from a security perspective? All of that kind of stuff. Specifically as it pertains to capture is the process and routing, right? So we can capture the information, but what is it going to look like when we have to get, or where does the information have to go? Do we have to call Cerner or McKesson and understand how their structure works, and if we can work with that, if we can send information there? And just internally as well, you know, who needs to see what and how do they need to see it? So then we go into user experience. And this is kind of what I alluded to a little bit early with the discovery portion. So user experience, we all deal with all the time, right? We go in and we watch something new, or DirecTV comes out with a new something, and we're like, man, this sucks. Like, why would anyone build something like this? And that's what people are thinking when they're using your new capture tool or your new ECM system or something like that. It's man, you know, my job was actually pretty easy. We're a successful company. Why would we blow this up and change it? And so I think this part specifically, as the technology exists, is something that just doesn't get taken into consideration. If your knowledge workers are going to have to do significantly more work to do the exact same thing, you are not providing a solution. You are creating a problem, which now a solution provider will have to come fix for you. Because what's going to happen is they're going to buy this really cool back-end system, and then nothing's going to get into it. It's not going to work, and then the owners or the C-level or whomever for the organization is going to be pissed off, right? They're going to be pissed off because their ROI, they don't see that $1 million ROI in 2 years or whatever that is. And it's because it's not working, because your user experience, specifically as it pertains to the people that have to get the information in, is a major problem. And it will perpetually be a problem until somebody takes a look at it and really understands what those people are doing. So the people, the people that are doing the work, that's why they need to be involved in this process. Because if you bring me in, I'm a knowledge worker, and you let me tell you what my problem is and tell you what I need to make it to fix it, or what I would appreciate to be fixed, then we've got a champion within the organization who's going to say, guys, listen, I know maybe this is a little bit more work, but this is the reason we're doing it, and it's really, really valuable. It's going to make your life easier. It's just going to be changed. So over the next 3 months, it's going to be a little bit more difficult, but after that, it's really going to get a lot easier. And flexibility. I've heard it a couple different times, with the way that the world exists with RESTful APIs and web services and all of these kinds of things, why would you buy something proprietary that doesn't give you the ability to work with anything else? Right? That's a pretty crappy strategy, in my opinion, when it comes to dealing with your information, specifically with capture, right? So the backend system, maybe not. Maybe you've got a very proprietary system that does exactly what you need to do. But what we take a look at in capture is, if I'm taking a look, so if I'm talking about scanning from a device, or I'm talking about mobile capture, I'm talking about whatever I might be talking about in the capture world, it's got to be ultra, ultra flexible, right? So one of the things that I find is there's even silos in capture, which is kind of silly. But so the reason that I say that it's silly is because, so when I walk to the copier and I have to scan something, I have a different software package. Did you have a question? Oh, okay. Gotcha. I've got a different software package, so I have to go there and authenticate at the copier. But then when I go to my scanner at my desktop, it's a different software. It's a completely different UI, and it's a completely different experience. And then if I want to, and then my company brings up a mobile application, which is, again, totally different than everything that I've been using. So the user experience, I would say, is perhaps the most important part of a successful capture implementation, because the people that are doing capture typically aren't people that are making the decision to buy the software or to use, they don't have that part of the skin in the game. So what's happening is the owner of the company is being told all these great things, but they have no idea exactly what the people who are at the lower level are doing. Whenever I sit in a meeting, and I'm a big whiteboard guy, so I usually like to, that's my first meeting all the time, no PowerPoint presentations, just let's whiteboard what you've got so you guys can realize just how screwed up you really are. Because I can't tell you, but if you see it on a whiteboard, it's much easier to understand, in my opinion. So what I'll find is, I'll have the CIO in a meeting, and then I'll have everyone down to, data entry person. And so what'll happen is the CIO or the manager of IT or something will say, well, this is what our process is. This is how we do it. We bought this software, and everything moves around, and it's perfect. And I'll see the data entry person just like, please don't call on me. Please don't call on me, because that's not really how it works. Because the CIO only cares about the results, right? They're basically saying, hey, we're going to put this in place. But the knowledge worker is saying, again, that sucks. I don't want to do it that way, right? I'm not going to do it that way, and I'm going to find a better way to do it. So if we could have some more communication where that person would have some autonomy to say, hey, there's actually a better way to do it. And the reason I know that, I might not have a computer science degree, and I might not be nearly as smart as you or get paid as much as you, but I do this every freaking day of my life, every day. So I know how to capture information, or I know how much the way that we do it isn't very good, right? So those things, I think, when it pertains to, again, user experience, but the flexibility in the technology as well is if you're not flexible, if your capture method is not going to be flexible, the reality is you're probably not going to use the same backend systems you're using 20 years from now, right? But if you can find a way to have capture be consistent, the benefit to the capture being consistent is that That person on the back end, the one that wants the reports and all of that kind of stuff, that's awesome. But the person on the front end who's really the person that's key to this, right? They've got to get the information in appropriately. What we do is we give them a consistent way of doing things. So if we can give them the consistent way of doing things, and all we do is we use the technology to extract different stuff that we need and send it other ways, and we've got a flexible platform to get information where we need to get it to, then we can have a really successful implementation, and it can be successful over time, as opposed to something that's successful right now and then saying, hey, we got to blow this up in 5 years because we didn't think 5 years down the road. So words aren't as fun as pictures. So what I decided to do was to show you, in my opinion, things to take into consideration again when in capture. The first being there are so many ingestion points for information, and you are absolutely shooting yourself in the foot if you're not taking a look at all of them in your capture strategy. So who needs to capture information? Where are they capturing information from? What is the information they're capturing, and why is that information important to me? So taking a look at all of those things. So where's that information coming from? Right? And then what we want to do is the big, we got to send that information somewhere, but we've got a lot of stuff we want to do, right? We are authenticating, we've got to encrypt or decrypt information, we've got to index it, right? We've got to set the document up correctly. There's so much of the processing part that takes place, and again, this is all going to, shake itself out in discovery. But taking a look at all of these different things, so the information comes in, what's it have to look like? Does somebody need to validate it? And then the data matching normalization. Because if you're not leveraging the data you already have in your capture method, you are really not doing a good job. Because all of that information lies somewhere, and when we talk about data normalization, what's the best way to normalize your data? Use the same data over and over and over again, right? Instead of having me enter an invoice number or something like that, or a vendor number, if I know what that information is, or I know that it's somewhere, why don't I go find it as opposed to re-entering that information? So that's another point to capture is your capture application needs to leverage the information that your organization already has. It can't be this new thing, right? It's not, the ingestion point is not one way, it's bidirectional. And if it's not bidirectional, you find yourself just really having trouble with data normalization, but also just having to enter so much information, and you're going to have so many more errors, and those errors are going to cost you money, and which is the reason why we don't want to do it. Right, so then we take all of this information, we put it all together, we make magic from it, and then we put it where it needs to go. Right, and now as things exist, we probably need different kind of information in different places, right? So instead of just saying, well, what this is going to do is going to go to my records management system, what we need to do is we need to take a look and we need to say, oh, okay, so if that's an invoice, the information for the invoice needs to go into my ERP system. But I don't want to store the document in my ERP system because I want that information to go into my document management system. And then I need somebody to get an email, and I also need to kick off a workflow. Right? And so when you do these things laterally, where each step is necessary, you're going to run into a whole bunch more problems than what you really want to run into. Then if you can take a look, again, at a good capture process, it's going to be able to understand, hey, this is where the information goes, and then I want to put it there. Right? The other thing that I didn't mention, or I didn't have a slide around, is security in capture. So security, again, we've been hearing this over and over and over again, is so critical. And so when we talk about security and capture, I mean, we're allowing people to put information into our critical line of businesses. And so we probably want to make sure that those people are the right people, right? So anyway, so as we go through, and then we can send the information where we need to go. And this kind of goes back to the open source or a little bit more flexibility than maybe what's happening now, is understanding, when that information goes, where is it going to reside, and how am I going to get to it when I need to get to it. So one more, oops. So again, taking a look at it from kind of a different perspective, what's really taking place, right? So all of this takes place in capture, and we kind of look at it like, oh, so you just scan something, you name it a couple ways, and you hit send, right? And it's much more than that, and it's much more important than what it's taking place. I'll tell you, in my opinion, this is the biggest opportunity space in our arena. So in the ECM space, right? There's lots in IT, and I wouldn't get into that, but specifically in capture. So when I go speak with organizations, this is the one thing that they're missing badly from their ECM practice or from their ECM system. It's so inherent, and I always love to tell this one story. So I'm from Pennsylvania, and there's a company in Pennsylvania that makes potato chips, and I'm sure that everyone is familiar with a company named Utz, right? So Utz is a huge company, but they're in this little town called Hanover, Pennsylvania, which is 5 minutes away from where I used to live, and it's crazy. There's $3 billion in commerce that takes place in the town that has 10,000 people. It's the snack food capital of the world, and so Utz, a company that's $650 million, every single day has these 10 ladies that go through all of the trucks and put oh my gosh, slipped my mind, a binder at each truck. And the guy gets it, goes through, does all his deliveries, writes everything out, provides the, press hard, gives the pink copy to the person that they deliver the chips to, and then they come back and all of that information there. Those people go, they capture all that, they grab all that information, and then they store it in a file cabinet in this huge file room. And then when anyone needs anything, you talk to them and they go find it. Right? So this is a huge company, right? But they have